If you want to see Sinners, don't watch this video essay full of spoilers by a Christian author. The Hubs and I saw Sinners, a horror film written and directed by Ryan Coogler. It's a period piece set in Mississippi in 1932. The plot follows the characters and the evolution of music all the way into the 90s. Music plays an interesting role in the film, serving as symbolism for legal ground, gifts of the spirit, and mediums. The opening is narrated by Annie. She's the first voice we hear, despite her supporting role not being introduced until later. Annie's voice is the perfect narrator and arguably a missed opportunity for the spiritual elements woven throughout the plot. In the opening credits, Annie describes a gift some people have that brings joy but can also attract evil. This segues into Sammie's introduction. Sammie, also called Preacher Boy, is a sharecropper whose father is a preacher. Sammie is introduced to the audience covered in blood and crying while stumbling into his father's church before it cuts to a flashback the day before, which is most of the film. Sammie has finished the day's work and is ready to do something he enjoys. Sammie's father is completely against him playing blues music with people who sweat on each other. Sammie is clearly at odds with his father over his views on blues music and juke joints. My words do absolutely nothing for the ever so important cinematography of this scene. During this not so much heated, but tense back and forth between father and son, there's a lot of focus on a guitar. It's later revealed that the guitar belonged to Sammie's uncle, who was Sammie's father's brother and father to Sammie's cousins, known as the Smoke twins. It's not long before Stack and Smoke, Sammie's cousins, the Smoke twins, are introduced. They have come back to their hometown in Mississippi from Chicago. They bring Sammie to town along with them as they reach out to old contacts to open their juke joint. If the time period isn't enough, the meetings during their trip to town solidify some of the racial overtones. The American South was notorious for segregation, complexion-coded laws, hate groups, and other atrocities. Sinners doesn't shy away from depictions of these things. In fact, Smoke and Stack bought the venue and the land for their juke joint from a known member of an infamous hate group. This becomes important when the plot takes a turn, but before it does, the twins' backstory and Sammie's gift are revealed. Smoke and Stack run into old flames during their trip to town. Smoke, depicted as harder and more level-headed than his brother, visits Annie. Smoke and Annie had a child who transitioned. During their conversation, Smoke questions Annie's spirituality, saying, "Why didn't it work on our baby?" To which she replies, "I don't know, but it worked on you." The viewer can identify the character behind the voice in the opening credits. This is also the first clash between Christianity and other forms of spirituality. Meanwhile, Stack and Sammie are in another part of town. Sammie convinces an alcoholic acquaintance from the past, Delta Slim, to play at the juke joint. Sammie and Delta Slim play a song together and attract an audience, including Perline, a young married singer, and Stack's former lover, Mary. She is also married. The tension in Mary and Stack's romantic backstory is partially racial, with Mary being either Caucasian or Caucasian passing. Smoke and Stack's love interests are a vehicle for the external conflicts, race, class, and spirituality. The obvious racial and spiritual elements presented up until this point are revealed to be so much more after nightfall. Before the sun goes down, there's one more crucial piece to the spiritual subplot. A man, Remrick, is shown running through the scorching field. Smoke is coming from his body. Remrick bangs on the nearest door for help, to be met with loaded barrels from a couple who owns the property. Again, the cinematography is important because it pans to a white hood inside the couple's home. Remrick begs to be invited inside, claiming to have been chased by the Indigenous tribe, the Choctaw tribe in this case, in the area. Eventually, he's successful. The indigenous tribe in question shows up to the couple's door, warning the wife who answered of the danger in her home. All the while, the tribe is cautious of the sun going down. They wish the wife blessings, saying, "God be with you." The tribe leaves before the evil they warned the couple about claims the couple in their bedroom. Elements of race and spirituality are reinforced in this scene. On the surface, the division is on racial lines, but the real battle is between good and evil. This becomes apparent at the juke joint when Sammie begins to play. He introduces himself, strums his guitar, and claims that he wrote this song for his father. The dichotomy is confirmed as Sammie performs. Sammie dedicating his blues song to his father and singing "I love the blues" is really a rejection of the religion his father represents and a profession of love for everything his father is against. God, the father to believers in Christianity and Catholicism, is also being rejected by Sammie. Instead, he's accepting everything that's going on at the juke joint, including provocative dancing, alcoholism, and adultery. Delta Slim, the other musician, tells a story. It's positioned as an old wives' tale about a gift so pure that it brought people together but also attracted other things. It's not a line-by-line repetition of what Annie says in the opening credits, but it's a connection. Annie is in the background serving attendees. The vampires show up outside and envision the juke joint being burned down around everyone who's dancing and having a good time inside. The burning is clearly not happening in the physical at this point. It's depicted as a spiritual, almost like a veil being destroyed as Sammie plays. It's at this point in the plot where the physical and spiritual worlds collide. Because I'm not entirely sure what Annie's spirituality is, I use the term ancient cultural spirituality. There are mentions of the ancestors and different spiritual planes existing, but the spirit realm that clearly exists in this plot isn't fully formed. Despite this, Sinners combines classic vampire lore with other forms of spirituality to show that the battle really isn't against flesh and blood. This becomes clear when the vampires come knocking. When the three vampires ask to be invited in for the first time, they use kindness, money, and familiarity to attempt to gain entry. They claimed that they were accepting of African American people. When that didn't work, they tried to appeal to the desire for equality and freedom. They're turned away. But Mary convinces Stack, one of the twins who own the juke joint, to let her go talk to the vampires they've dismissed. When she does this, they're singing and playing music. Their song is sweet, but the shadows that the camera angles capture strategically and beautifully foreshadow what's about to happen. Mary is drawn into the vampire's trap, not by the music, but by familiarity. The cinematography makes it clear that Mary is skeptical at first, but is comforted by there being another woman in the midst. They speak to Mary's pain, having just lost her mother. Once she realizes that the people she's talking to aren't people, it's too late. She walks back to the juke joint to be invited in. The dramatic irony is brilliant, not only because the viewer knows something that the other characters don't, but because we see the tricks that the enemy, I use that word strategically, uses to be invited in. When she couldn't get in with kindness, she played on cornbread's, the doorman's insecurities. Where Christianity and ancient cultural spirituality collide is with Annie. She's the most spiritual person at the juke joint. Her practice of ancient cultural spirituality made her skeptical of the vampire's speech before it's confirmed to the main characters that the people outside are vampires. Annie is the only one who knew what vampires are, how they affect their victims, and remedies to eradicate them. Wooden stakes, silver, sunlight, and invitation are elements that have been present in Gothic horror and vampire fiction at least since Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker, being Catholic, is clear in his rendition of the bloodthirsty creatures. Wooden stakes come from the aversion to religious symbols like crosses and holy water, because vampires are a depiction of possession. They're evil creatures that claim and drain lives to replace it with their own, leaving the physical host inhabited by evil. Whether repelled by a cross or permanently kept away by a stake through the heart, wood is a symbol for the crucifixion of the Christ, which also ties into what makes sunlight so powerful. Mercy comes with daybreak. The crucifixion, the cross, is the ultimate form of mercy. Jesus resurrected in the morning. God's mercy is renewed every morning. The presence and the extermination of vampires has always been symbolic of evil being destroyed by God's grace. The same holds true in sinners, but with a slight twist. In sinners, the twist is in the spirit realm. Instead of the human soul being completely lost, it's trapped inside the body with the evil inhabiting it, which allows the vampire to know its victim's past. The crossover to a spiritual plane contrasts with the Christian view of going to heaven or a holding place described in the Bible. The spiritual plane is referenced when Annie mentions the human soul inside the vampire being unable to join the ancestors, and toward the end, before Smoke's transition. Other than that, the spiritual system in the plot isn't developed despite its existence. Vampires as antagonists reference Christianity by their nature. Their dialogue with the living human characters has strong biblical references and moral questions. Vampires are still the enemy. The first vampires in the film are Caucasian, two of them being members of a well-known hate group, juxtaposed with a primarily ethnic cast. There are obvious conflicts across racial lines, with the American South as the backdrop and non-POCs as the main antagonists. It's easy to assume that this is where the true lines are divided, but that is not the case. There are a few different ethnic groups in this film. Each of them has their own spirituality, Christian or otherwise. Each of them has some sort of concept of evil forces. Despite the complexion-coded optics, there's an underlying message that we, humanity, are all fighting the same thing. Evil, an enemy that wants to take and destroy everything that we love. The Bible talks about familiar spirits and the temptation of earthly pleasures. That's exactly what comes into play when vampires come knocking in every scene. The reason they need an invite is because evil needs agreement to torment its victim. On this plane, we have choices. This element is subtle, but always present. Sammie chose the blues. Smoke and Stack chose the love of money and the pursuit of freedom. Delta Slim chose alcohol. All of these choices had consequences with the soul hanging in the balance. This is the moral question. Is this what it means for music to have soul? The answer in Sinners is a resounding yes. Music is a medium because the vampires, particularly Remick, are drawn by Sammie's music. It's a means of channeling. In the spiritual sense, Sammie's musical talent channeled a devil. What makes this an interesting chord to weave is a mixture of Christian doctrine and urban legends behind blues music. According to Christian doctrine, Lucifer, an angel who was kicked out of heaven and became what many called the devil, was an angel of music. Remick, the vampire that came for Sammie, is hinted at being a symbol of Lucifer himself. He's lured by music and is seemingly the ringleader of all the other demonic creatures around him. Using blues music with the American South as the backdrop seems intentional. Blues is clearly inspired by other forms of music birthed in the American South, such as spirituals and bluegrass. It evolved over time. The evolution of music is depicted both when Delta Slim was telling the story at the Juke joint and at the end of the film when Sammie goes on to become a famous musician into his old age. Stack and his lover Mary, both vampires, visit Sammie in a club after a show. Stack offers to make Sammie a vampire so that he can keep touring and promises no pain. Sammie rejects the offer, leaving the viewer to wonder why they weren't violent with him like they were with others. Before this conversation with an aged Sammie and Stack, the film circles back to the beginning, where Sammie is distressed from everything that the viewer now knows happened at the Juke joint. Like a prodigal son, Sammie's father offers to embrace him despite his sin and says, "My soul belongs to God." It's a father's desperate plea with his son to return to Christianity and leave a sinful life behind. When Sammie's father begs him to put the guitar down, Sammie refuses, and it led to him being visited by Stack in his old age. Sammie already gave his soul to the blues. He gave legal ground, not so much with his gift, but by committing adultery and rejecting the Father, both with a lowercase and capital F. Sammie chose his earthly reward. Therefore, the devil, represented by his uncle Stack, didn't have to be violent or tempt him anymore. He had chosen. As a result, he got fame and fortune, the earthly gifts he wanted, which creates the symbolism of music being a medium. It also ties into legends about blues musicians selling their soul to the devil for fame and wealth. This storyline is just one of many depictions of such tales. Though some of the spiritual elements seemed a bit underdeveloped plot-wise, the moral questions are common to humanity, just like temptation. Sinners is an exploration of spirituality wrapped in a Southern Gothic horror. Though evil will always come knocking and beckon you with everything you've ever wanted or your deepest fears, don't sell your soul.